So I started martial arts in 1975, and I trained a variety of different martial arts. And what I tried to understand is that there are limitations to every single dimensional approach. And Bruce Lee said this. He's like, you cannot be trapped in the cage of the classical definitions of style. No painter paints in only one color their whole life. Obviously, they want to experiment. You have, Picasso's blue period or something like that. But in general, what you're going to do is you're going to use all the colors of the palette to produce a work of art. Just like with martial arts, you're going to use all the techniques possibly available to you to be functional in either self-defense or express yourself in a physical manner. The more restrictions you put on technique, the more inefficient you'll generally be, because you'll always have an area where you don't understand what to do. So it's very important to expose people to all the dimensions of combat. Now, the issue with this is, and again, this is Bruce Lee's philosophy, but the issue with this is if we say all dimensions of combat, that can be incredibly chaotic, meaning where do we start? So what we tried to do here is, yes, we have outside kicking range, we have boxing and elbow range, we have clinch range, we have cage wall, we have ground control and guard, ground control and pin, all these different positions of engagement of human geometry. But instead of doing the entire spectrum of possible moves, we restrict our curriculum to the highest percentage moves. Now, every martial art person will say, hey, my move is the highest percentage or this. And I was like that too. It's, hey, this is my high percentage move. And that was based on my personal experience. However, people's personal experience are always limited. What we tried to do is have a very data-based approach. In the entire history of modern MMA or the UFC, we can say, let's take a statistical approach to all the results. So if you go to UFCstats.com, or you go to CompuStrike, or you go to Topology, or you go to Sherdog, you have the list of pretty much every major MMA fight that's ever happened. And you can do a nice deep data dive on what's going on and what's working. And what are the highest percentage finishes, the highest percentage moves, and most importantly, the highest percentage ways of thinking strategically. Right? And that's what we try to do. We take the Moneyball approach, if you're familiar with baseball. Mm-hmm. So what they did was they did a statistical study of how to take these B-level players but maximize their potential, and they wound up winning the World Series. We take that same thing, take a statistical study of the sport of MMA and see what is absolutely working the best, and we restricted that. So basically this comes down to the unit principle of the Pareto principle. 80% of your success is from a small subset of your moves. They say usually 20%, but sometimes even less. So this small subset of things is responsible for the majority of success. And this is like a kind of human dynamics rule. It works in corporations, it's the 80-20 rule, what's known as the Pareto principle. The more we study what's happening in MMA, we realize that there's a lot of moves we just don't need to do. We need to focus on these things over here, and these games here, and these strategies here, and boom, we're good. And so far, we've had very, very, very good success. We are winning a lot of matches, and my students are very young because really post-pandemic, everything was start over. So I'm dealing with people who've only just really started training most 3 years, and we're doing extremely well. So that's our philosophy.
Escape forward, kill the T-Rex, kill the T-Rex. Escape forward, 3, 4, good. 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 Look, sweet, go. What did you forget? Your turn. Okay, not creep, turn. Turn. There you go. Good. Be in the bed.
You trained all around the world. You studied history of warfare. And what is the most savage lesson that you've picked up along the way from the mats to the textbooks?
The most savage lesson? That life can be uncaring and brutal and short. Life does not care about your feelings. Life does not care about, how good you were to your grandma. Life doesn't care. life will hit you with very, very, very difficult lessons, and the only way to prepare is to train extremely hard and honestly say what are the most likely things to happen in terms of my danger. If I walk down the street in a very bad neighborhood of New York City and I'm not paying attention, well, guess what? I'll probably get mugged, right? You know, they don't care if you're a nice guy. They don't care what happens. You know, you could say, this happens all the time in MMA. People come to me and they say, yeah, I want to be the next MMA champion, this and that, and they don't put the work in. Now, for our academy, if you don't put the work in, you're not going to fight. But a lot of the places they'll go, they won't put the work in, they'll go in the cage, and they'll really, really meet reality. And reality won't care what kind of person you are, how nice you are, how many friends you have. It only cares what you can do. And it's really, to me, that's an exciting thing because all the pretense, the delusions, all this are gone. It's, can I do what I say I'm going to do or not? It is absolute truth. And you have to be incredibly accountable to your technique and to your desire for precision and technical excellence, because if you're not going to perform well. Somebody's going to knock your teeth out. And I've met many, many martial artists over the years that thought they could do one thing. But when it came actually down to it, they were unable to do that. But they deluded themselves over years, and they, did their katas or their forms, or they did their, sport jiu-jitsu rolling or this, that. And then when they're in this real life, incredibly violent moment of survive, either in the cage or even more likely on the street, right? They're wholly unprepared for that reality. And most martial arts schools are glorified men's clubs or people's clubs, mostly men, in that they're social clubs, and people have a great time, and there's nothing wrong with that. They have a great time, they get some exercise, sort of Asian or martial arts inspired aerobics or athletics, but that is not actually preparing you for violence. It's preparing you for a specific subset of dueling, if they actually even spar. And that is not real violence. That's not something to prepare. What we hear is we are always going to prepare for the highest level of violence. Now, at the same time, we'll have a good time and we'll enjoy ourselves, but there has to be an extreme accountability to reality. And if we do not respect that reality cares not a whit about your feelings, then we're in the land of delusion. And we can have all our black belts or this or that. None of that matters. The only thing matters is the truth in combat.
Good, take the X. Kazushi. Take one. Okay. That's it. Okay. Yeah, he does not like it. Okay. So here, now, after the full first trick, he's going to teach you this second trick. Okay. You're going to go like this, and this is called X marks the spot. Okay. What's it called? X marks the spot. Now, from X marks the spot, we're going to slap, bicep, trap. You might have seen people do it this way. Do not do it that way. You'll get yelled at. Badly. I'll grow devil horns. And you will not like me. We will never do this. We'll grab here. Now we're going to go Kazushi. Now when we did one-handed choke, we rotate it once. So we're going to rotate once. Now you're going to leave it there. And then you're going to rotate two. Perfect. Okay?
Radical MMA is all about brains over bronze, and I love that. But let's be real, not every gym has that motto. How do you spot the difference between someone who's training smart and someone who's just trying to Hulk smash their way through?
Well, first of all, our philosophy is the way it is because you can't always Hulk smash your way through. If someone comes behind you and stabs you in the kidney 3 times, I don't care if you're Arnold Schwarzenegger, you're not going to be able to Hulk smash because they just stabbed you in the kidney, which actually happened to a friend of mine. You have to have technique, and that's a survival moment that either you're technically excellent or you're dead. And in that case, a friend was able to defend himself, thank God. But he was not able to generate that level of athleticism that he might normally have had. However, I'm not here to cast aspersions or make negative comments about any other gym. If people want to train their way they want to train, it's fine, right? You can be very effective for maybe 20, 30 seconds by being completely untechnical and barbarian, particularly if you lift weights and take steroids. So that can be very effective. It's not doubting the effectiveness of a barbaric approach. However, you've got about 20 to 30 seconds to make that happen. And that can be enough in some situations. Right? That can be enough. Even some fights only last 3 or 4 seconds. So, good on them. That's just not what we do. However, some people are less able to really focus on technique. That's not what they want to do. And you know what? If you want to train that way, I have who am I to say that you're doing anything wrong? I just do what I do because I know, for me personally and a lot of my students, we can't always generate that level of force, particularly me. I don't know if you've read about my bio, but I was hit by a car. I'm very seriously injured, and I was on a bicycle. I had a bunch of surgeries. I recently just had my knee replaced. So I've had a lot of medical things to repair my legs, and my legs just don't work right. So I can't generate, even at my best, I can't generate much force through physicality. But what I can do is I can generate tactical and technical leverage, which is very, very effective. Only because I've had such great teachers. It has nothing to do with my personal ability. It has to do with the teachers teaching me extremely high level technique. And I want to respect that and transmit that on to my students so that if they're in a situation where they're outgunned physically, but hurt, that they can still be very, very effective. And then there's some students who've come here who legitimately don't want to train the way we train. And so I just asked them to go train somewhere else. That's what we do here. Maybe that's not for everybody, which is fine. But that's what we do. And if somebody wants to do something else, fine for them. I'm not here to criticize. I don't personally agree with it because of my personal experience and the way I see the world. But who am I to tell someone to see the world differently? Lift weights, take steroids. That can work. It's worked in the UFC too. There are a lot of guys that are not technical, that are very, very dangerous for, a certain amount of time. And then they cease to be dangerous. Or they're out technique immediately. Like Cyril Gane's a very good example of someone who's an extremely technical striker. And he fought Derek Lewis, who was very, very powerful, but not quite as technical, though I wouldn't say zero technical, but much less technical. But he has a lot of power, a lot of reach, and very big guy, and very hard to hold because he's extremely, extremely, extremely strong. But Cyril Gane made it look like a day in the park. And then you have John Jones fighting Cyril Gane, and it was like he was half asleep and still tapping out. It was just easy, right? So when you're technically excellent, a lot of times strength and power just don't matter as much. And that's what interests me. That's the interesting part for me personally. But that's not interesting for everyone. Like, you want to have to use your brain. If you don't want to use your brain, then this academy is not good for you. And every to each their own, right?
You do whatever you want. Be comfortable. So good training. Go. Oh, you okay? Hi. Well, this is watch out. Who's your instructor? Who's your instructor? Who's your instructor? Okay.
Open.
You gotta be on the choke side. Yeah. Stop saying I know. Say os. Os. Touch your toenail. Touch your toenail. Touch your toenail. Ready?
Open.
Open. Open.
The rack guard, it's your signature, not something from a bag of gimmicks. You designed it out of necessity and post-injury. Can you walk us through the mindset shift of turning adversity into innovation? How does that change your game as both a fighter and a coach?
Wow, fantastic question. Thank you. First, I want to say the rack guard has existed for probably a couple hundred years, if not more. It's originally a judo position. I learned in judo. A lot of people, what I did was I took it and I developed it, but I did not invent it. Just it was named after me because basically people would use it as a control, but they didn't really know that much to do from there. Maybe a guillotine, maybe a stand-up, something like that. I maxed it out, the possibilities there. And there are a lot of different types of rack guards, a lot of different positions. And it's actually becoming more involved too, even among people who are not injured. But for me, I was not able to play certain positions that are affected because of my legs. And I found myself falling into rack guard and finding it very easy to defend myself. And I said, well, let me take some time and really develop the system because this really works for me. I had one moment where I was training with a friend of mine, and he was someone that in the sport of jiu-jitsu that was much better than he was. And the sport of jiu-jitsu is that people don't understand there's no punching. Right? There's no punching. It's just you're grappling, submission grappling versus my submission grappling. Right? So in the sport of jiu-jitsu, it's much better. But he was particularly good at ground and pound. So one time I said, okay, let's add ground and pound, and we're using no-gi training, some no-gi or anything like that. Add ground and pound. And then suddenly it went from me being able to win pretty much every single match to me struggling and really not doing well. And I realized that was the moment I realized, well, a lot of these sport jiu-jitsu positions are just not designed for MMA. And the only thing that came back to that really worked on a high percentage manner for me was the rack guard. And then, so I said, that's my game. But what I started to realize is that the rack guard itself is something that everybody can do. And even if you're not injured, it can offer a very good path to success for anybody, particularly if they've been locked. And you could see this in the fight with Shevchenko versus Grasso 1. Shevchenko is probably one of the most talented fighters in the world. And she was fighting Alexa Grasso, who's great, but not quite on the same level of Shevchenko, at least on resume. And Alexa Grasso used the rack guard, completely shut down Shevchenko's ground and pound. It seemed to really mess with Shevchenko's head. She said, what's going on? I don't understand what to do here. And that confusion was used as a moment for Grasso to stand up. Shevchenko threw a spinning back kick. Grasso jumped on her back and jumped around. And that whole sequence, the rack guard, was key to getting a transition between defense to offense. And it was very, very effective. And this is a person who, not maxing out the rack guard reps probably, could have done it a little better, at least in my opinion, but still incredibly successful against one of the best fighters in the world. So, and it takes almost no flexibility. It takes very little strength and just an understanding of angles and practice. And so I've been asked to teach it to a number of people. However, like you said, for me personally, I didn't have a lot of options because my legs were bad. The rack guard was just a very, very, very a position I just kept coming back to. And so I started developing there, and my fighters have had a lot of success with it too. Of course, we don't want to choose to be underneath people, but if we are, we tend to do fine. One of my students, Devin, had a fight in recently, and he was fighting a very, very, very high level guy, and he got taken down. This other guy was an extremely good wrestler, and Devin shut down his ground and pound completely with the rack guard. The guy had no strikes, and now we did lose the fight because we were not able to stop the takedown. But Devin took absolutely no damage in that fight on the ground and was able to protect himself completely. He wasn't able to quite turn it around yet, but we can work on that, and hopefully we can fix that mistake. But the ability to protect yourself and take zero damage is really what the rack guard is about, with no real high level of flexibility required or energy expenditure. So it's something I push in my system. That being said, there's not one guard. I believe in studying all the majorly successful guards. So it's not like, just play my system. We look at what the best guys are doing in MMA and mimicking that as well, and using each tool in a toolbox. So if I need a screwdriver, I use that. I need a wrench, I use that. The rack guard is one tool, but we should have a whole bunch of them. At no point do I say, just play my game. That's not a good teacher.
I thought it would be weaker than that.
So first, most people come out with this in there. So if you try to grapple here, you'll die. So you have to come over and then come here. Okay, Japanese. Standing Japanese. So standing Japanese here. No, I didn't hurt you.
No.
Okay.
No, see, I told my roommates.
So here, punch over. Now, Coco. Rush it. Head to head. Beautiful. Robot. Come on, let's do it. Yeah, this is enough. This is supposed to be high. Yeah. So here? Okay, come here. So most people do this going, right? So this, if you just try to punch me, you're gonna die. Right. If you just try to grapple, you're gonna die. It has to be in the mix. You're coming over punch and go up and rush right now. Tighter. Good. Now, Japanese right there. That's good. No,
You built this community that values respect and inclusivity, which isn't always a vibe in combat sports. Was there a moment that you realized that, yeah, we're doing something different here? Or has this always been your ethos and non-negotiable for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I moved to Japan in 1992, I walked into a lot of different martial arts schools, and I was never treated badly because I wasn't Japanese. I was treated very, very well. So it never occurs to me to judge anybody other than on their ability. I don't care if you're big, tall, fat, skinny, male, female, whatever. Nobody cares. You can be a space alien. I don't care. If you're willing to work hard and be disciplined and play well with others, it goes to, you have to be part of the team. If you can respect everybody, then it doesn't matter what you do. Just put the work in, and everybody's welcome here if they want to train hard. I am very, very strict, and I don't play around with people who are not focused or who are not trying hard or who want to do something more, recreational or, just, I want to take a rest. I don't do that. So if you're willing to give me that level of effort, then of course I'll come back 300% because that's a valuable thing. The student's time, if they're giving me the real effort, their student time and their energy is very valuable. And I can never disrespect that. A person's commitment and their trust in you as a teacher is something that must be valued highly and lauded. So anybody comes in with that attitude, I'm 100%. I don't care. I don't care if they've, a unicorn horn. I don't care. They're here to work hard. Well, that would be a good weapon. I have to create a different martial art for unicorns.
I wouldn't put that past you. I'm sure you would, Coach.
I'm going to turn it on. Don't freak out. I'm not going to stab it, okay? I'm not going to stab it. But I am going to turn it on. No, it's conversation. It's just the responsibility.
So Valley Judo, old school M&A, no fluff. That's the DNA of Radical MMA. But with today's fight game, what techniques of mindsets are still getting overlooked? What's the dark horse skill every modern fighter should work on?
That's really interesting because that mixed martial arts, meaning combat, like mixed martial arts means mixed of martial arts, but really what it means is there's combat in every range of human violence. So kicking range, punching range, elbow range, clinch range, all that. And there's no rules to stop it. So when boxing gets the clinch range, the ref stops it, right? When in wrestling, when you pin someone, they stop it. You don't do a submission. In kickboxing, if you get down, I don't follow you down and ground and pound, right? But there's a seamless transition between the realms of combat. What happens is because people are still training, generally a little bit more single dimensions, they're not as we haven't evolved enough the transitions, the mixing. So the transition between elbows to clinch, back to elbows. So I have this funny word that I call, I say I don't grapple, I don't strike, I strackle. I strike and grapple. So I want to grapple and strike at the same time. But when you're used to just wrestling or used to just kickboxing, those transitions tend to be a little harder. And even today's mixed martial arts, you see a lot of people that's still a little bit more one-dimensional than I think they should be, because the sport is still very young. It's only really 30 years old. And we're just developing. When you compare it to baseball, baseball's already, 150 years old, right? So we're still a baby in the modern transitions. That being said, some of these ideas are actually incredibly ancient. If you look at old jiu-jitsu, Japanese jiu-jitsu textbooks, Japanese jiu-jitsu, depending on the style, but for many styles, was a combination of striking and grappling simultaneously. Now, of course, it was in armor and things like that, so it doesn't look like what we do today, but the concept of blending ranges and consistently using every weapon at your disposal is something that existed, universally in the ancient combat arts. It's something that we're discovering more now because we've had, decades of just boxers boxing, just kickboxers kickboxing, wrestlers just wrestling. But MMA is that hybrid of all forms, and finding the seamless integration and the switching back and forth, striking, grappling, striking, grappling, striking, grappling, always switching in very tactical and tricky ways is something that we're trying to really develop here. And I think the room for evolution in the sport is tremendous. Like, we've only scratched the surface. You see each year techniques that people thought were incredibly difficult and things like that. Like, there's the thing called the Showtime kick, right? Which was one person jumped off the cage, and I was like, oh my God, this is such a crazy move. And the other day I saw like 10-year-old kids do it. Like, they're just like, and just regular kids. Right? They're like, this is just something everybody does now. And it's so obvious, using the cage as like a springboard to push yourself off of. And it's like, actually, when I tried, I'm like, it's not actually very hard. Look at that. And you're in this position where you can use the cage creatively. And that never existed in any sport, because no other sport actually had a cage. So the idea of using the cage wall as something to kick off of and then jump in the air and throw a punch or a kick just never existed before, maybe in the movies, right? But not in real life. And this is something that people do all the time. And is it a high percentage? I don't know, but it's something that was very creative and very interesting, and shows the evolution of how we think about the sport in different areas of human violence and the geometry of one person trying to dominate another.
Same thing as headbutt, tight. Now if I do this, outside Russian, inside Russian, trying to attack.
I really like the videos on the HowCast channel. How did you and Radical MMA link up with them?
They approached me. I had almost nothing to do with it. They said, would you be willing to do some videos, because we have a lot of requests. And at that point, now we have social media. This is before social media got big, and there wasn't a lot of meaningful content out there. At least, there was some here and there, but most of it was like you have to buy a videotape and this and that. Now, it's flooded with content. But I wanted some content for my students, but also I thought, why don't we give back to the community? There's a lot of people out there that don't have access to decent level instruction. So if I could take a day and do a few hundred of, that was 140 videos total, I think I did. If I could help some people with our system and the way it works, works, why not? I'm very grateful to this community. A lot of people taught me, and they charged me almost nothing to or sometimes nothing to share their knowledge, to have access to their knowledge. So it really is important for me to give back to the communities in ways that I think is meaningful to some people who maybe I'll never even meet. But I've gotten a lot of emails from a lot of people around the world. One of them was a person from Africa and messaged me and said, "Man, I think your instructors are great," and that actually sparked a really, really good friendship. And I'm very, very happy to have met him. But it was through the videos. So actually, doing those videos, while it was a kind of a selfless act to help people, actually I've gained so much from it. If I could see how much I've gained from those videos in terms of friends and acquaintances and developing people in the community, knowledge of other people in the community, I would understand that it was probably the most selfish thing I could have ever done, because I got back in spades what I put out there. It was one day, it was a hard day, but it was 2 days actually. 2 days of hard work, and then after that was just, on the do. That being said, those instructionals, they're about 15 years old now, so sometimes I look at them like, I do that a lot differently now. So sometimes I look at them, I'm really happy, after 15 years you evolve a little bit. But if they can help people, I'm very happy. And HowCast was very kind enough to set up a really good cameraman, and it came out pretty good,
Okay, last question, Coach. Let's say someone who is completely an MMA novice, never done an MMA class, walks into Radical for the first time. Maybe they throw in a few air punches in the mirror, but that's about it. What is the one piece of advice you give them to carry with them on the mat?
Be obsessive. So anything you want to do, put aside martial arts. You want to learn the piano. You want to get good at school. You want to do this. You have to be committed in a way that's authentic and really, really a bit of obsessive. You look at anything you're good at in life. So whoever is listening to this right now, you think that's something I'm really good at. One, the time commitment was tremendous. Two, you did not wait to be spoon-fed. You had the initiative to seek out knowledge and to really push yourself and to hold yourself to a high standard of commitment over the long period of time. So anybody can be committed for a week or a month or two. How do you be committed over the long time and be obsessive about things? And this is why, a lot of guys that are fighters today are some of them, I wouldn't say all of them, but there are a number of them that are kind of a little on the spectrum, because I think sometimes people who are a little bit on the spectrum find ways to be obsessive about things in very, very constructive ways, right? They take that neurodivergence and they push it into something and they get tremendous rewards. And that means also sacrifice. So a lot of times we want to just sit home and eat the potato chips, or we want to hang with our friends or this or that. I can't tell you how many moments, really important life moments I missed to dedicate to martial arts. Do I regret it? No. But there were conscious choices that I made that I will have to sacrifice these things over here to get this thing over here. And they were hard sacrifices. They were not easy. But my obsession to develop guided me in that direction. Be obsessive and you will see results. Hold yourself to high standards and make the commitment over a long time. And that's really the success. It is not about talent. Hard work, effort, and smart work beats that talent every time. Now, if you have talent and great work ethic and great coaching, then, of course, fantastic. But there are a lot of people in the UFC who are doing very well. One of my favorite fighters is Pantoja. I absolutely adore Pantoja. Pantoja is, if you look at his striking, you can see that he really, really struggled with striking for a long time. And now the other day, he fought against the Japanese fighter, Asakura. Asakura is known as a very good striker and had reach on him. And Pantoja just did a clinic on a person who comes from this striking background. This is a grappler who was terrible striking and turned himself into one of the best strikers in the 125 division. Not the best, right? But at this point, he's the best in the world. but he's definitely up there as a striker. And he did that through absolute obsessiveness and dedication. And he had no talent in his training. What he understood through his jiu-jitsu training was, hey, hard work, discipline, sacrifice, grit. These are all things that will out. Not excuses, not giving up. It's very important to be able to take the ups and the downs of the martial art journey. There are times where, you're gonna get tapped out by the entire room, and you're gonna want to go home and cry in your pillow and come back. But you have to. You have to. Remember that person who said, "Hey, I want to be great." Now that person, you have to be committed to helping that person achieve their dreams. That person is not you anymore. That was that person that started with the But that person, you have to be accountable to that person's dream, and especially when it gets low. I'm very lucky because, again, I had no talent, so I never expected to win. So even when I did badly, I'm like, all right, well, I'll just do better next time. So I didn't have any expectations of winning, particularly when my legs were bad. So when things happened well, I was like, well, this is great. And then when things went badly, I said, I'll just work harder. So I kind of like not being talented helped me get over the humps because I said, well, every day is a hard day, But, I think that's true with everyone. Even when people are talented, you're going to have talented grappling, but maybe not striking, or talented striking, but maybe not grappling, or talented against the cage, but not in the ring. Everybody has something they do well at and something they struggle with. Nobody is universally good at everything. So you're going to have to put the time in, and you're going to have to, as they say in Asia, eat bitter. Absolutely eat bitter. And I believe in eating bitter. Like, I don't hold back. I never lie to my students when they're doing badly, because that does them a disservice. It also disrespects them. It disrespects their commitment, right? If I lie to them and say, hey, great job, that is disgusting as a teacher, because I'm not being accountable to their dream. I'm sabotaging their dream. I say, no, that is terrible. Fix it. I'll see you next week, and you better fix it. And they almost always do. Right? And if it's not next week, it's the week after. But holding them up to a high standard is the highest form of respect. And as a teacher, I have to do that. But unfortunately, commercialism weighs on a lot of people, and they're more about coddling students and giving participation trophies than actual development of skill and really walking the true martial art path, which is discipline and sacrifice and hard work and grit.
Well, Coach, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a wonderful interview.
Thank you.
Guys, go to the bathroom. Whatever it is, Simon is fighting and Devin is fighting on April 12th, right? Yes? There he is. Couple things I want to say. I'm really Devin's not your face here tomorrow. He works on Fridays. But Devin got his last fight canceled, and then he specifically asked that you would be in Simon's fight camp because he knew his energy and your energy together would be awesome, right? Because we wanted that's called teamwork. But he didn't have to fight, but he did because he wanted to be there for his team. I detest selfishness. Okay, so I don't play like that, right, guys? We need to be together.